Hello everyone, and welcome to the next edition of the Holland Land Office Museum Artifact Video Series. My name is Ryan Duffy, I'm the director of the museum, and this week we are going to talk about Edwin Newton Rowell and his box factory. Now, E.N. Rowell, as he was known, was born in Utica in 1847 and began his career as a bookkeeper. Eventually went to work for Dr. A.S. Palmer, who was a box maker in Utica, and specialized in pillboxes as well as the machinery that made those type of boxes. When Dr. Palmer died, his son William took over the company, and he and Mr. Rowell were good friends. This allowed Rowell to rise quickly up the ranks of the company. He rose so quickly that he eventually formed a partnership with Palmer and expanded the business. By 1881, the business had grown so much that they actually moved to Batavia due to its growing economic influence and its connection to many of the railroads and other arteries of the economy. However, this partnership didn't last too long once they had come to Batavia, as Rowell split off from Palmer and formed his own box company in 1884 in friendly competition. He soon specialized in pillboxes and eventually cosmetic boxes, which made the company famous throughout the country for that. Eventually the company grew so much that they actually had to build a brand new factory. They built a large brick factory on the corner of West Main and Ellicott Street, today where the new Genesee County Courthouse is built, and continued to expand. And the company operated for many years out of that building and employed thousands of people through its time. Now, Mr. Rowell passed away in 1929, but the company lived on after his passing. His second wife, May, actually took over the company and continued its operation until she died in the 1970s. So the company operated for about 100 years in Batavia and employed many people and became a mainstay. The company eventually ceased to be in 1981, and the building that the factory stood in was actually torn down in 1983. However, it wasn't just his factory that made E.N. Rowell famous. He's probably more famous for his legal trouble that I mentioned previously. Now, I mentioned his second wife, May, but now I'll tell you a story that involves his first wife, Jenny. Now, E.N. Rowell and Jenny Luce were married in Utica in 1875. The two met because Jenny's father actually worked with Rowell at Palmer's box factory. The two hit it off and were eventually married and actually had 2 children together. However, life was not all blissful in the Rowell household, as E.N. Rowell, being a salesman, had to travel a lot, and this left Jenny home bored and had a wandering eye, as she was a very attractive woman that drew a lot of male attention. And this caused Rowell some consternation, and he was very suspicious of her, and to the extent that his friend William Palmer actually kept an eye on Jenny when Rowell was out of town. And Jenny found this out and actually accused him of spying. And it's actually the reason that Rowell and Palmer moved their factory from Utica to get away from her potential quarters in Utica and move it to Batavia. The continued to grow, to worsen, as Palmer actually came with evidence of a potential affair by Jenny with a man named Johnson Lynch, who was also from Utica, in a Rochester hotel. Now, Johnson Lynch actually has a famous relative. He was a descendant of John Adams, but his story is more intertwined with Rowell's, in which he became famous himself. Now, eventually, with the moving to Batavia, that hopefully was going to put a stop to any of Jenny's flirtations or infidelities, but this was not to be the case. And E.N. Rowell suspected that she had continued her affair with Lynch, so he devised a plan in order to trap them. The plan was that Rowell would pretend to go out of town, as he normally did, and tell Jenny this, and then wait to see if Johnson Lynch would come into Batavia. and then he would catch them in the act and ruin them. However, it didn't quite go that well to plan. So this is now 1883, and Rowell goes about his plan and tells Jenny that he will be going on a long business trip and he will be leaving that day and be gone for quite a few days. So he leaves the house. They lived at 123 Bank Street, and eventually makes his way towards the train station as he was to board the train to go on his business trip. However, he did not get on the train. He posted up at one of the hotels right by the train station and waited. And sure enough, the next day Johnson Lynch arrives and gets off the train. So Rowell follows him and he goes right to Rowell's house to meet Jenny. Rowell's plan was to go up the back stairs, hide in the adjacent room, and come out and throw pepper in their eyes and shoot a slingshot at Johnson Lynch and force him out of the house humiliated. Somehow that didn't happen. Instead of having a slingshot, he had his revolver. So when he hears them in the act, he busts into the room, throws pepper but completely misses because the lights are off. And instead of shooting the slingshot, he fires once at Lynch but misses. And Lynch hurriedly tries to get out of the room as quickly as he possibly can, and Rowell fires a few more times and still misses until Lynch reaches the top of the stairs to go down to leave, and finally Rowell hits him and kills him. Lynch's lifeless body actually tumbles down the stairs and falls out of the front door of the home, dead. This causes such a commotion throughout the neighborhood as they heard the gunshots that all the neighborhood runs over and sees this dead body sitting in front of Mr. Rowell's house. Now, this did not seem to affect Mr. Rowell in any way, as he casually walked downstairs and walked out over Lynch's dead body to the public outside. And calmly and coolly says that this man had been having relations with his wife, and as such he had to kill him. Jenny was not too happy with him, obviously. She screamed and screamed at him and hit him and ran away. Though Rowell tried to get a kiss before he was taken away by the authorities. Now, Mr. Rowell was taken to jail and held until his trial, but the trial doesn't go as you might think with a murder taking place, with a murderer that admits to the crime. Now, the trial lasts a little while, but eventually Rowell is acquitted, as the crime was seen as a defendable act, as he was defending his honor as this man was cheating with his wife. And it didn't hurt that Rowell was a rather influential man in Batavia, as he and Palmer's Box Factory at the time employed a good number of people. So after the trial, Jenny leaves Mr. Rowell, takes the children, and moves to Colorado, and that's the last we really hear of her. However, this was just the beginning of Rowell's notoriety, as soon after he starts his own box factory, and this is actually where he meets his second wife, May. May worked as one of his secretaries in his office, who he eventually marries, and builds what we know as the Rowell Mansion on the corner of Ellicott Ave and Richmond Avenue as a wedding present. And it's where they lived for the rest of his life, and it's where May lived for the rest of her life. So Mr. Rowell is one of those interesting characters we have in Batavia's history, and both economically and socially, we have many stories to tell about him that draw a lot of interest and intrigue. So I hope you enjoyed this edition of our Artifact video series, and be sure to come on down to the museum and check out more about Ian Rowell. We actually have an outfit of his, a tuxedo and hat of his, and many of the sample pillboxes that his company actually made right here in Batavia and distributed around the country. And if you happen to miss any of our previous videos, feel free to go back to the channel and check them out, and we hope that you come back for the future ones that we have.